Hello, everyone, and welcome to this
Good.
year's NCIM National
Was
Forum. We are so fortunate to be gathered here today to further our learning on and discuss Indigenous midwifery and everything beyond birth. My name is Neelach Ironhawk Tommy, and I am coming to you today from the unceded territories of the Quw'utsun-Mistimuh community, which is in Duncan, British Columbia. As people are logging on, I would like to share the following housekeeping items. Welcome, everyone. I would like to start by expressing my gratitude to all of the NCIM and CAM staff who have been working behind the scenes to ensure that we have an amazing forum today and tomorrow. An extra special thank you to all of the participants who are here today from coast to coast to coast. This is a short orientation to the forum to ensure that everyone can join in and participate fully in the forum. Our staff and technicians are here to support you. If you have any technical assistance, please use the chat. Today, the forum will be available in 2 languages, English and Inuktitut. To access simultaneously translation in Inuktitut, please click on the More button on the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, or select the globe icon for interpretation. Mute the original audio button if this is your preference, and choose from the drop-down menu to choose Inuktitut. You can also choose to mute the original audio button if this is your preference. If you do not see the interpretation globe, you may need to log out and sign back in and look at access in your browser like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, and select the interpretation there. We'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the vital work of our interpreters who are here to ensure that all of our conversations are accessible. I kindly ask that as you participate throughout the day, you speak clearly at a measured pace and allow for brief pauses. This will help our interpreters provide the best possible service. For those with a tricky internet connection, we will be recording both days of the forum and posting these on our website as soon as possible. Some may still have difficulty even with the recording because of their internet connection speed. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to mail out a copy of the recorded forum on USB key to ensure your ability to view the forum. We are continuing with the legacy of our watch parties. This is our 2nd year doing watch parties. If you have not registered your watch party, maybe you are in a boardroom with some people or on a couch with your friends, please register your watch party so we can know about you and submit names of your participants for all of our raffle prizes. Below, you will see a link to our watch party resources. If you go to https indigenousmidwifery.ca/watchparty-2025, you will see interactive features there, activities, questions to consider, resources, and information to help advance conversations related to Indigenous midwifery. During the forum, please remember to use the questions and answer buttons to ask questions for our presenters or for the forum support. We love the idea of bringing people together and love the idea of doing virtual information sharing and knowledge, knowing that you are gathering in person. A reminder to all watch party hosts to please complete all of your forms and submit them after the event. A big thank you to all of the watch party hosts for organizing your local events and bringing everyone together. This is also an opportunity for you to connect with others in the forum to advance our collective efforts to bring birth back and to advance each other in our efforts to ensure excellent care for Indigenous families. We hope you'll make use of our interactive features on the website. One of the great ways to connect is to add to your location on the map. This will help us see where everyone is. Please come and place your pin on the map. You might notice as the forum evolves that there are others near you interested in this work, and you maybe want to connect and collaborate and advance your efforts together. If you want to leave your social media handle, your website, or your email, this can be a great way to find each other after the forum is done. Please put a pin and on the map, and if you would like others to reach out to you, you can share your contact information directly on the map. We also have a discussion board, so if you have a question or more information to share, this is a great place for you to post.
Taba kiterapigiunnarpait
You
apiqqutigiunnarpatillu
can share
oqaasseqamiase
resources, photos from the day, information
amma
about work you're doing.
atinguallu qanuilorsimayullu ulluqayattini tavana iliyunnar miyatit
We are excited to share that this year we have great raffle prizes. We've
taima
always
saalassartittit
done this.
sunniaqatta
This is a super fun part of the forum.
tamanna
This year,
saalassartittina
you do
suarluta
have to be present to claim
quviannartoquluumman
the prize.
ilaungikkaluaruvi ilaujunnerputi
We also want to acknowledge all of our partners.
amma ilagiyavut
The
pilqatigilimaaqiyavut
Nurses Association, Indigenous
ilitaqiyimavavut
Physician Association of Canada,
tanatamiirniu
Inuit Women
tulniqunniit
of Canada, who
Insuksiit,
added their great
Inuit
swag to our
lo
raffle this year.
insuksiit
We want to acknowledge
alaksartitiniarmimmata
who donated 1 iron fish at a discount and a discount code that can be found in the virtual
Taima.
grab bag for all
tavani
three.
pitaqarunnarpo
We have 2
saalaksartissami
prizes per day. Watch party hosts, please use the attendance records in the form selection of the watch party resources, and please send your lists of participants typed rather than by hand into the form so we can easily cut and paste your participants' names into the raffle wheel. So please send them in the next hour. On the NCIM forum webpage, you will see the virtual swag bag resources. This resource bag includes many great resources from our partner organizations, so a big thank you to the Native Women's Association of Canada, Paktuit Inuit Women of Canada, Les Femmes Mischief Ottamiswik, McMaster University Indigenous Research Institute, First Nations, and Social Secretariat of Manitoba. Thank you to our sponsor, Lucky Iron Lifes, who's offering a discount code that can be found to get 15% off any purchase, valid until March 31st. We also have a survey for Indigenous midwifery students enrolled in an Indigenous midwifery education program. We would appreciate your participation in our anonymous survey. Of course, there you will also find some of NCIM's resources, such as relevant to Indigenous midwifery and Bringing Birth Back Media Toolkit. We are excited to have you continue to use our social media handle, Birth Back. We have aligned and building from the Land Back movement. We want everyone to know that this is an issue for everyone. It doesn't matter your age, birth is important to all of us. Please tag us at NCIM Midwives. We'd love to see what you're up to and what you think is important. We hope you will use this to elevate your voice about the importance of bringing birth back to your community and the importance of Indigenous midwives. If you have an Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, please get started and post now. Post a selfie or a group selfie photo, tag at NCIM Midwives, and write the name of your community is Bringing Birth Back, or in name of community, I am bringing birth back. We are excited to see your posts. And so, without further ado, I want to wish everyone a great forum. I would like to continue to welcome everyone as folks trickle in. We just completed a few housekeeping items, and now I'd like to officially start this year's NCIM National Forum, Indigenous Midwifery Beyond Birth. To start, I would like to introduce Maria Campbell, who will be opening the forum for us today. Maria Campbell is a Cree Métis writer, playwright, filmmaker, scholar, teacher, and elder who was born in 1940 in Northwest Saskatchewan on a trapline and grew up in Road Allowance community. Campbell's memoir, Half-Breed, 1973, is regarded as a foundational piece of Indigenous literature in Canada and for its attention to the discrimination, oppression, and poverty that many Indigenous women experience in Canada. Campbell has authored several other books and plays and has directed and written scripts for a number of films. As an artist, Campbell has worked with Indigenous youth and community in theatre and advocated for the hiring and recognition of Indigenous people in the arts. She has mentored many Indigenous artists during her career. Maria has dedicated her life to upholding Indigenous midwifery teachings and supporting midwives in practice, in ceremony, and in creating a lineage of mentorship that will support Indigenous midwives for generations to come.
Thank you. Somebody said they were nervous. I'm really nervous too. Anyway, good morning to everybody. I'm kind of nervous, but I'll do the best I can, and I'll speak slowly so that she'll be able to translate for me if she has to. And I'm going to use Cree words. Some of my words will be Cree. And I'm doing that because the language of midwifery in our communities, for those of us who are language speakers, a lot of that language is lost. And so I really believe that if any of us know words, that we should share them with each other and try to recollect those again and reclaim them and use them. So if I say the words, I'll only say them in my language once, and then if you want them, I can send them to you after. Okay? Kinanaskum now, epewi komieko makape kapewi chita go kau tena meg muesten. I want to thank you for inviting me to open this really special visit that in English is called Forum, and what our long ago ukeska pesike iskrewak, our old midwives would have called a miokilgewin. A miokilgewin means a good visit. And I think about these gatherings when everybody gets together in the same way. It's kind of hard because it's different. We're online and we can't feel each other in the same way that we can and be able to support each other in that way. But it's a new way. And like my grandma used to always say, this winter is not like last winter, and we should always try to find new ways to be able to move forward. As I said, ukeska pesike iskwewak means midwives in my Cree Michif language, and miokilgewin means a good visit. When I was a little girl, I was given to my great-grandmother, who in her younger years was a very well-known and respected midwife. But by the time I came along, she was too old to practice her midwifery and her medicine, because she was also a healer. And so she passed it on to my grandmother and to her daughters, who married and moved into other big extended family communities and became midwives in those communities. So she was well known for her work as a mentor and as a midwife, but she was no longer doing it when I was a little girl. Should I stop so that she can translate that?
No, you're good to go, Maria.
Okay. Anyway, I was given to her when I was little, and I think I was probably about 2 years old. My grandmother, by that time, had arthritis and she couldn't walk very well. My great-grandmother, she couldn't see. She was starting to go blind, and she had hardly any teeth, so she couldn't always chew her own food. And so when I was given to her, she called me Chichi, and Chichi means my hand in our language. And I called her Chichim, which was kind of I don't really know how to translate it, but it does have to do with hand. And that was what we called each other for all of the years until she passed away. she would get up sometime in the morning or any time of the day, and she'd say, come my hand, let's go for a walk, or come my hand, let's go berry picking, or whatever. And I would come running up to her and say, I'm here. And I'd give her my hand, and I'd make sure that wherever she stepped was a safe place, because she couldn't see where she was stepping. And I'd describe everything that was around her whenever she would stop. And sometimes she'd stop by plants, and she would point the plants out to me. She'd say, tell me what they look like, and I would describe them to her. And I was just little, but I had been really well groomed by my mother and grandmother on what was expected of me to look after her, and had been made to believe what an important job this was that I had. It was not uncommon in those days for the first great-grandchild or first grandchild to be given to the old women so that they would be able to pass on language and culture, and in her case, be able to pass her gifts on. And so she would tell me to pick some medicine for her, and I would pick it, and she'd sit down, and I would talk to her about this plant, the color of the flowers, and then she would break them off and smell them, and she would tell me about them, tell me what they were called in our language, and what they were used for. I never received recipes from her. She only helped me to identify the plant. Sometime I'd have to chew it. And there's some medicine, I'm sure for those of you who work with medicine, you'll know some of it is pretty horrible. And then some of it is really good. And but you never forget that medicine once you've chewed it and you've smelled it. So that was what I did for the early part of my life. That was my job. She would take me to the water. We lived near lots of little rivers and sloughs and small lakes. And she would tell me about water and the plants that grew in the water. If a bird was making a lot of noise, she'd tell me to describe it for her, and she'd tell me stories about that bird. She taught me how to be really curious and to always ask questions. And I'm in my 80s, and it's something that I still do today. I love talking to anybody if I can ask questions, and they'll tell me about it. But in my language, that way of working is called Mamiu Kohtonam Kewin. Mamau mi Kohton Kewin. And that means reciprocity. And it's a relationship that happens with old people and children from the time that we're babies. They say that the first reciprocity when we were born is that when the old lady caught us, she would help us to come into the world in a good way, and we'd feel safe because she'd sing songs or burn medicine that maybe was familiar. But we would be born, and we would be talking the language of a different place. And so we would meet each other at that birth, and an exchange would happen between the two of us. And that old people and children worked together in our early cultures before we were separated from our old people, so that we would, as babies growing up, we would teach our old people who were now going back to that spiritual place, teach them how not to be afraid, and for old people to teach us how to be excited about that physical world, and that exchange would happen, so that reciprocity was always happening, and we were always responsible for each other until one of us was gone. So that was how I grew up. I grew up with this old lady, and I remember special summer days when all of the other midwives would come to visit her, and my dad would put up 2 tents, and everybody would come in, and they'd visit and exchange medicines and do all kinds of things, and all of us little girl helpers would run around doing errands and getting in the way, but we were learning how to work with each other with with the idea that in the old way that someday we would be midwives all over our communities and we would know one another and be able to share our work with each other. But I think I was about 10 years old. I'm not sure now. But my brother, my youngest brother, was the last one who was born at home. My grandmother, not my great-grandmother, delivered him, and that was the year that midwifery was outlawed in our community. And it changed everything totally. Within a very short time, our community was totally different. Because when the midwives stopped delivering babies, it was also a time when we stopped looking after people that were sick and dying, because that was also the job of the midwife and healer. She would, with her helpers, come in and stay with families and look after the person who was really ill, and sometimes they'd make them better, and sometimes that person would die. And when they died, it was, again, the midwife and her helpers who would lay the person out. They would bathe them with all of these different medicines and dress them, and the helpers and the aunties would make new clothes for them to wear. And the men would build the platform before we had caskets. And then after we started using caskets, they would build caskets for them. And the whole community took part. People would bring food, they'd cook it together, and we would sit with the body for the 4 days. And that was when we would cry. They would have other old ladies who would help us to cry. And then those, that 4 days was finished. And once the body was put away, we were not to think about that for a year. And sometime it would be quite tragic. I never saw this, but my great-grandmother had a part of her finger missing. And these were some of the things that women would do when they would lose somebody, is to let them go, because it would take them a long time to get to where they were going. We were told not to cry and mourn them. And so these old ladies sometimes would cut a piece of your finger off if you didn't do it, to help you to be able to move your concentration and grief onto yourself, so that you wouldn't hold that spirit back. So I think about all of those things, and if somebody was acting outrageously in the community, our midwives would go in and because they had birthed everybody, they would be able to negotiate and calm people down and counsel people and help them. So they were also, I guess you would call that policing a community, because sometimes they would get after you. They didn't just negotiate that you calm down. But once midwifery was gone, within a couple of years, those things were gone too. And along with that went our language, our midwifery language. We no longer used words like the words that I was trying to use. I found those, and I've only started to use them and try to make them a part of my vocabulary again, because many of our words have the stories or the medicine that we need in them to do our work. So I think about all of those things when I think about the work that a midwife does, and how important they were to our community. And I think more than any other time in our history, that time is here where we really need the strength and the authority of midwives in the community again. I know that it won't happen overnight, but our communities are in such terrible shape. For many of them there's so many things that we need help with, and nobody from outside can come in and help us with those things. Those are things that we carry, and we have to find ways to waken those things up. And part of that is reclaiming language, reclaiming those ceremonies, doing those birthing things again, getting together and celebrating births, having naming ceremonies, walking out ceremonies. All of those things make our community strong, and they make each one of us stronger. And so I think about that as I'm thinking about this opening and ask Creator to take care of everybody and to bless those, midwives that are out there now that are getting older, and that they give them good health and strength and courage to be able to as we say in our language, to be able to stand up for the babies and the children and to speak for them, and to be able to help our people to role model, I guess. I don't know what to call it. To say those words so that when we hear them, something happens to us and our memories are triggered, our remembering. I ask Creator to give us strength to be able to do that, to clean our ears, to make our voices strong and help us to do that old work that was the work of our midwives. And for all of those young women who are thinking about midwifery, that we older ones are strong enough to be able to help them and to accept that there are new ways for us to do things, and that we are able to pass those old ways so that they can find new ways to do that. I also thank our Mother, the Earth, for always keeping all of these old things alive for us, because nothing ever dies. We put it down, we forget about it, but it'll come back again. We can make those things come back again. So I thank her and her beautiful robe, and that she stand with us as we lift each other up with those new tools, those old new tools. And I thank Kanotagawatayuhkan, our first grandmother as well, our very first grandmother who birthed the first baby. I thank her and ask her to be with you for the next couple of days in your meetings, and that she be with you wherever you are. Our first grandmother is related to all of us. She changes looks maybe, but she's still the same woman. And I thank the four grandfathers for protecting those four doorways and all of the treasures that we still have. I give thanks for those, and I give thanks for all of the little midwives that are not born yet, that they will be here and that they'll have loud voices and be strong and have lots of medicine. And I thank the medicine, and I know that it'll always be there for us. And for those of us who know even two medicines, if we teach them and pass them on, that they won't ever be lost to us again. So thank you for inviting me. Nanaskumal, Semanto Viagate Bechike, Dragonwin Goya, Kawichi Goya, Goma, Meskanau Kabmotea, Kagusichia, Kaguimusichia, Meosik Meskanau Kagusita. Egwamina Gawinawaski, Wistamina, Nanaskumal, Gokum now Nutagoa Tayokan, Ewakimusum Nawakan, Ewa Pichekakio. Xaki now Kakio, Daisini Macnoako Maganak. How mercy. Hi. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, for that beautiful opening. I would like to now share with you a message from the National Council of Indigenous Midwives co-chairs, Alisha, Julien, Reid.
Gwe, Deluisi, Alisha, Julien, Reid, Jalasi, welcome. My name is Alisha Julien Reid. I'm a Mi'kmaq midwife and co-chair alongside Inuk midwife Samantha Leclerc. And we are really excited to be calling in from all different parts of Turtle Island. I'm sitting in Mi'kmaq territory where I'm from, and I'm really excited because I think, just even this week, as in last week, all my weeks are one right now. We were just saying that February is a dark and cold month. And I was able to talk to someone from the province here, and they were saying, what does, midwifery have to do with a collaborative care health center? We're not building a birth center. And I said, actually, there is a lot beyond birth and pregnancy. And one aspect that I know will be talked about by one of our speakers is really in line with that, and that's building trust in our intuition as Indigenous folks and as pregnant folks. We really do have that sense, and I think I was listening to an OB who's walked a journey and was reflecting on their early days of training, and said they had a very distinct moment of recognizing when they convinced a pregnant person not to trust their own intuition, but to believe what they were saying was best. And they've, since walked out of those ways of being with people, but had, felt pain around that. And I think that if we think about our own history, we can see those moments where our intuition was telling us what to do, and the times when we listened and the times when we didn't. And I hope that really listening to the enlightenment and the insights of folks around the big picture of health and wellness in our communities and in ourselves, that we can encourage folks around us to trust their intuition, to trust their babies, to trust their bodies, and to bring that up again, right? Because that's going to be a big part of our healing. And I know that that's what I've witnessed in those really precious sacred moments of birth and beyond, is when people can trust themselves and follow through with what they're hearing. And only those people can know that. So thank you for being here. Exciting watch parties and getting together and centering on what so many people have been working on for many years, and hopefully can see the fruit of that work soon. Thank you, Willalin.
Thank you, Alisha, for that heartfelt welcome. Remember, if you have any questions or need assistance, our team is available to respond to any questions in the chat box. I believe it's time to get this forum started. Our first session will be the history of midwifery and Island Lake Anisininew Nation, presented by Rita Flett. Rita Flett is from Garden Hill, Anisininew Nation. Her career has been within healthcare systems and in child welfare services. Most recently, she completed a short-term project in relation to midwifery doula for her homeland for the Island Lake Anisininew Nation, which includes 5 communities: Garden Hill, St. Teresa Point, West Sagamach, Red Sucker Lake, and Winnipeg Urban. Over to you, Rita.
So I want to say miigwech for the invitation to be part of this forum. I am very happy to be here and to be sharing some of the our past history of our community of Anisininew Nation. So it's part of my introduction. My name is Rita Flett, as I am an Auntie, born and raised within the Island Lake community. Today, I am honored to speak about the historical journey of midwifery within the Island Lake Anisininew Nation, a subject close to my heart. Midwifery has been a crucial part of our culture and history, especially in the northern isolated communities like Island Lake, where access to resources, health resources, is very limited. As you know, Island Lake is very isolated, and it's still you can only go in through during the whole year. you can only access that our community through via planes that go locally there, and that too is very limited. Um, uh, we usually don't have a scheduled flight, and so it's very isolated like that. So as you know, midwives has played an essential role in the lives of our people, ensuring that new life is brought into this world safely and nurturing the health of mothers and babies. I just wanted to share a little bit about that. Um, when our babies, when new birth is as told by my ancestors and also my late great grandmother and late grandparents, I was really immersed into the eldership in our communities. So as a Anisininew nation, the whole community was involved, not just the midwife and the other helpers, yeah, but the whole community would get involved and just surround that person that's going to be bringing new life into our nation. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that as part of the mentioning about isolated communities, how isolated our community still is. On a good winter days like today, this past month and a half, that the cold weather has been in favor of opening up the short-term winter road where we get our supplies and essentials into our Alnick. So that's been quite a struggle past few years with this like climate change, and that's another big part of our struggles as a Turtle Island. So I am a mother of 5 grown daughters and a grandmother, honored to be grandmother, to be become full circle with 14 grandchildren. So I have witnessed firsthand through the lives of our grandchildren and the resilience of our community and the importance of uh, preserving traditions and supporting our families through midwifery teachings. So I am grateful to share this journey with you today and honor the role that midwifery has played in the lives of so many, many within our nation. So my presentation is historical journey of midwifery within the Island Lake Anisininew Nation. I would like to share a remarkable story about my Danku, my great grandmother, Helen Monroe, who was the midwife in the Island Lake region starting in 1920s. Known for her wisdom, skill, and unwavering dedication, Helen was a traveling midwife who ventured far beyond Island Lake to serve other isolated communities within the Anisininew Nation, spanning across northern Manitoba and northern Ontario. During her years of service, um, the stories of local history, of local when shared through many stories that she she had delivered 225 babies in our nations, not just Alnick, but in northern Ontario. And sorry, I have Alisha. So Helen Monroe was very known when I was working up north. This past short-term project that I was working on, we did a little bit data about trying to get the youth involvement. What do they know about midwifery, and what do they know about what a midwife is? About 70% of our youth didn't know what it was when we did that little study. And when I went into the schools in Island Lake to try and get input of where our community stands in terms of midwifery and that knowledge, where was it cut off? The teachings. So I was trying to find that out during this when I was doing the short-term project for our people. So hold on. Personally, I feel an incredible connection to her legacy, as I was the last baby she delivered in April of 1964. So I'll be 61 in 2 months. So the last baby to be born in recorded in recorded history with the archives. Helen Monroe has only there's only about 105 births that is recorded, but verbally we heard stories about over 200, because that is our culture, is verbal teachings that go on. And so being born to the last, being the last, I kind of well known in my community, even though I left for residential school in 1978. Yeah, 78. So I was immersed in the community all this time of my birth, 1964 until 1979. I was nourished by our community. I was nourished by our elders. I was nourished by the women of our community until I came out for residential school. And but at that time, my parents were very adamant that education is very important, as well as the community teachings, in order to bring forth the history of our people. I remember that clearly. When my parents were, I was kind of hurt that they would want to send me away, given that I'm a generational. My mom was raised in residential school from 5 until so and so. But with me, it was during my teenage years that I had those years of nurturing. But I just want to say, this is where the colonialism, I know it's not part of midwifery, but it affected the traditional practices in the Alnwick region, because there is a loss of teachings when people started our people started being forced to go to residential school. So it has greatly affected the people in Manitoba, especially when it comes to midwifery. Midwives played an important role in the community, giving mothers birth with care and tradition. And their arrival of the Western and Puistashite, all these traditional practices, and hospitals were replaced. Midwives, as mentioned earlier by our recent speaker, that residential school harmed Indigenous families and the passing of cultural knowledge, including midwifery. Most important, midwifery, Indigenous women are forced to give birth in hospitals that didn't respect their culture, and I think it caused a lot of. I can confirm that it has had a lot leading health challenges up until then and now. So today, many Indigenous communities are working to bring back the knowledge of midwifery, not only to restore vital practices, but to heal from harm that was caused by the colonialism system that was in our communities. So the indigenous, thankfully, I was doing when I was hired on. I was really thankful when I found out about this National Council of Indigenous Midwives. There's already history that was started. Like I didn't know that until I got, So I just wanted to remind people of this clip that our friends did from the NCIM. So I'm just going to play it now. It's not a long.
It's 1903 in a northern Indigenous nation. Margaret is about to give birth. She is embraced by community, buoyed by a skilled Indigenous midwife. The baby arrives and the whole community rejoices. In 2023, Margaret's grandchild, Emma, is 36 weeks pregnant. She's forced to board a plane, leave her community, and wait alone in a city hotel to give birth. She waits and waits. Finally, the baby arrives, but she returns to a home steeped in stress, heartache, and disconnection. Since the 1950s, this routine forced evacuation for birth and many reproductive health services has been a grim reality. Indigenous midwives were sidelined, replaced by colonial models that have failed Indigenous communities, leading to vast health inequities, including the country's highest infant mortality.
So this is this is the I was really thankful that to have seen this clip. There's more if you look into their website. There's just a small clip that I took out, but it is true that our people are still going through that. That they have to leave their children back in the community, isolated community where the father can't be involved. As I mentioned earlier, that the community was an essential part of birthing and the practices of midwifery. It was the whole community, but now that was cut off when Western medicine practices came into our communities, and relocating the birthing mother to the city where at times that the language is a huge barrier. As I mentioned earlier, when I left for residential school, my first language was the Anisininew language, formerly known as Ujikri, but most recently, through studies, that our language is very significant, and it is compacted to the Alneg area. And so just a little touch on the language part, but the mothers are now separated from the support system, from the family, and an example is the other children that are left behind. Sometimes there's 2, 3, 4, 5, children left behind, and by the time she gets back, there's already problems within the home because of that separation that happened. So just a little I just wanted to mention a little bit about that. When I had my firstborn, was 1982. I remember coming out alone. My firstborn, she, my firstborn, I was alone. I didn't know what to expect being a first-time mother, and also, at that time I didn't have any teachings about bringing a child into to the world, and because of that part of that colonialism that happened, so that that those teachings wasn't passed on to me. So my firstborn was 1982, and I was alone, and but nobody, because my English wasn't my first language, and then I just couldn't really communicate with the people in the South. But uh, so when we want to revitalize midwifery practices back to the nation, when I did this project, it's a beginning. But of course, funding was an issue. Also, why it was only short term. But the Anisininew chiefs are the five chiefs there are the ones that are representing in the Allen Lake area. I thought I'd kind of use that as you can see here, the map. This is where the Allen Lake. This is where I come, where I was born, and where I was raised is in this area, right here. And the midwife traveled. This is the province of Manitoba, and this is the Ontario side. So, the midwife. My great grandmother traveled with some helpers, and because in this area there is a lot of stories about her traveling this area with a dog sled. I can't imagine the hardship that they had to endure to get to these communities, and a lot of times she didn't make it. There is she told me stories, and when I went back to the community from being in school, and I would spend a lot of time with her. She lived up to 102. She lived up to so as mentioned in my as part of my presentation was bundle making. This is a bundle right here, and this is my 11th grandchild, Malachi. His name is Warrior Malachi. So this is the bundle that that was passed on, and I still make these. And we can also carry this in the back of our and then we carry our babies around, and I've been teaching my my kids and my grandkids about this bundle making. So I remember I was 11 years old. I was playing around my grandparents and my great grand, and then I was playing outside, and so all of a sudden, my great grandmother was saying, "You guys come in here, girls come in here." We didn't want to because we were still having fun outside, and but as 11 years old, she was talking to us, all of us that were sitting there playing with my cousins and the community members. And I think there's about maybe 12 of us, maybe 10, 11 years old. And she said, you're going to be a cook one of these days. You're going to be a granny one of these days. So you're going to have to learn. And, of course, 10 years old, 11 years old, we kind of giggle about it, because, like, who's going to, am I going to have a baby? And so, yeah, this is part of the, I wanted to mention about bundle making, that very few of us are still, but I want to make an effort to continue to teach, continue to be an example to the midwifery community, and my prayer is that we can get the Allen Lake region, Allen Lake community, Anisininew Nation, to have this birthing center. That is my dream. I am 61 in a few months, so I'm hoping to accomplish this as part of my healing, as a part of my children's healing, and my grandchildren and my great grandchildren to come. So I'd like to say miigwech for the invitation, co-chairs, and thank you for listening. And as you know, that I through questionnaire, I can be reached through this forum, through this organization, NCIM Midwifery. Thank you, miigwech.
Thank you for that great presentation, Rita. I see that there is a question in the chat box. They're asking if these are difficult to make. They are beautiful, I agree. I also would like to learn. So I have to find the map of everybody, and maybe we can gather locally to the people that are close together, and we can learn from each other. So thank you again. So our next session will be Food as Medicine, Wellmouth and English Relationships to Land and Body, and will be presented by Keisha Amanda Charnley. Keisha Amanda Charnley is an Indigenous registered midwife from the Katzie First Nations and Blackburn, Lancashire, England. She is based between Nanaimo and Victoria and Vancouver on BC on Snuneymuxw, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territory. Keisha attended her first birth in 2011 and has been a birth worker ever since, alongside being a midwife. Alongside being a midwife, Keisha has also worked in Indigenous food sovereignty through gardening and plant medicines, and as a researcher and consultant. Her role as an auntie to her Wellmouth relatives is the guiding force in her life. Over to you, Keisha.
Thanks, Neelak. I think my baby recognizes your voice. She's trying to talk back to you.
Oh, I love her.
I'm just going to load my PowerPoint here. So, eats up while and Keisha Talitsan Aklak Eatsy, E Blackburn, England. I Swale, E Shamshamo. Heitzapkausium Musqueam, E Squamish, E Tsleil-Waututh, E NCIM, and nice to see you all. I have my little baby here with me. Her name's Tamia, and her dad's here watching her. They might make a cameo at some point. And I'm calling in today from the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh lands in Vancouver, BC. I am based between Vancouver and Nanaimo. I grew up here in Vancouver, and I'm from the Katzie First Nation, which is a small nation just an hour outside of Vancouver in the Pitt Meadows area along the Fraser River. Where our family is from is just north of the Fraser River in the Pitt Lake area, which is a beautiful place if you ever have the chance to go there. About 13 years ago, I know this because I just saw the baby, who's not a baby anymore. I attended my first birth in East Vancouver, and I've been a birth worker ever since. 3 years ago, I became a registered midwife, and I'm a co-founder of the Equatal Indigenous Doula Collective. I just had a chance to look through the participants who are here today, and a couple of the other members of the Equatal Doula Collective are here, so I feel held accountable to my presentation today. Talk a little bit about what led me to the work that I do and how it connects into food as medicine. And then alongside being a birth worker, I'm also a researcher and a consultant. So my journey to midwifery was really deeply linked to food. And we're actually here in Vancouver right now supporting family in the hospital. And so it's really bringing me back to my learning of the healthcare system as a child, and just some of the heartbreak that came up for me growing up and seeing what it was like for family members to access healthcare. And even when I was as young as 10, sort of recognizing that the healthcare system wasn't exactly healing, and not really understanding that irony. And so I started volunteering at the Indigenous Health Garden, which is called Wet'suwet'en on Musqueam territory at the UBC farm. And I was also in a youth program in high school there, and I met an elder named Rose Point, who is from Musqueam. And she taught us about plants and babies and midwifery. And up until that point, I hadn't really heard about midwifery before. And the teaching that really was present that summer and for the summers to come was to be so thoughtful about what we put into our bodies as caregivers, especially if we're actually hosting the baby in our bodies as well, that everything we eat and consume actually becomes that baby. And so the thoughtfulness around what we're eating and the way we're relating to the land actually translates into our healthcare. And that was a teaching that really resonated with me and really got me curious about the role of midwifery. And so for about 10 years after that, I continued to be involved at the Indigenous Health Gardens, learning about how to harvest and grow food, learning about plant medicines, and even hoping to become an expert, hoping that I could one day have a farm and hoping to garden and know all there is to know. And as the years went by, I learned that I probably will never know all there is to know, and that this is a multi-generational work, and it's something our ancestors have put a lot of labor into in gathering their expertise and the technology of how to live alongside the land. And a lot for many of us now, who haven't had that intergenerational knowledge necessarily passed down. I grew up in the city. Uh, it's sort of like listening to those whispers on the land and picking up the teachings and the gifts that our ancestors have laid down for us. And I really wanted to talk about what it is like to be to come from many places, and for me to feel this deep connection with both my xʷəlməxw ancestors from Catesy and also my English ancestors from the area of Lancashire, specifically Blackburn, England, and trying to love all the parts of myself, especially now becoming a parent. My baby is 7 months old, and so I'm pretty fresh into parenthood and wanting to really learn alongside my baby of how to really deeply love myself. So the land has been something I've understood to be important to both my English and my xʷəlməxw ancestors. And it's something that I think was a beautiful thing, a commonality at one point in history. And for some people still today, where farming and gardening and gathering and hunting, our foods and the stories that link us to our foods really give us that deep love for the land. And hopefully throughout the presentation, I'll be able to talk about how I think that feeds into midwifery as well. So these are some of my ancestors. This is Mammon and Tatten and their children. My great grandma's on the far right. The reason why, well, I think many of us in our family really think of Mammon and Tatten as the anchor of everything we do now. But especially for me in my work as a midwife, there weren't a lot of discussions about births when I was growing up, except for my own. I did hear a lot about my own birth. And when I started to become interested in birth work, I started to ask a lot of questions about births. And I learned that Aunt Tilly, the youngest here in the middle, was the person who delivered my grandma and my grandma's siblings. And I thought it was an amazing story. And I couldn't believe that I'm still in awe of birth work and birth workers, and I couldn't believe that this amazing story had been not shared with me yet, as something that really deepened my reverence for my ancestors. But I did grow up with lots of stories that were shared over the kitchen table, around food. And I noticed that too, working in the gardens, that we would share a meal together and the stories would come out. It's also a cultural thing in our communities. And I think in many communities that the meal is essential to the work that we do, to ceremony, to our relationships with one another. And birth stories as well, I've learned, are so central to birth work. And so these connections between food, land, and birth really have become clearer and clearer for me over the years of just reflecting on my own family stories and my own pathway of getting here. And what I heard over and over again from knowledge keepers in our communities is the importance of sharing stories with the families I serve as a midwife. And it's really hard to do as a registered care provider to create space for story sharing, because we're really rushed. Even as midwives, where we work in a model which is a little bit slower, I feel very, very rushed in my work. And so the idea of sitting down to share a meal with my clients, with their families, to learn what foods are important to them, what stories are important to them, what is their history, and how can I be of service to them in the best way possible, that is my dream, and that is the standard of my work. And it's really, really difficult for me to action that. And so that's something I've been grappling with, both as a midwife and then having gone through the process of accessing midwifery care myself and longing for that kind of relationship. And so, just as I mentioned before, I really feel that healthcare is more effective when it becomes relevant to who we are and is actually tailored to who we are. The buzzword is like culturally appropriate, culturally relevant. And I think Indigenous midwifery really does respond to our stories because we have that shared place together. We have, many of us, shared histories, shared relatives, we're cousins. And that allows us to really tailor the care that we provide to one another. And that makes it meaningful, and that makes it work, I think. And just even the last couple of weeks being in the hospitals and witnessing the care that's provided, I've been thinking, well, one, seeing hospital food, it really makes you think about just how far we have to go in the hospitals. And two, just wishing that that continuity of care and those relationships were really forefront in the hospital system where people acutely need to heal. And thinking about this, really, our clients want to be seen, and that really relies on the difference between listening and hearing. And I find it's really easy for me to listen to my clients throughout the day, but to really hear them and to really know them, that takes time and slowness. And this is a picture, a postpartum picture of a salad my doula made me while I am taking care of Temia. And as I was working in the gardens, I started to reflect on this idea that the land produces the food that we eat, and the food becomes our bodies, and our bodies become our descendants. And whether you're the person who's carrying the baby or you're a caregiver of the baby, we share food with one another. We do skin to skin with one another. It goes beyond just simply pregnancy and birth, although that is a really complex part of this idea of our lands becoming us through the food that we eat. But it's pretty amazing to think of our ancestors cooking and eating food and harvesting food and how that became them, and then they became us. I find that idea really grounding to me when I think of how important food is and how different my reality is now to that of my ancestors. And food, I've noticed as well, is a really easy thing for me to neglect as a birth worker, being gone for days at a time or all night. It the more years, the more I became a midwife. So after graduating university and entering midwifery, the more time that passed, the worse my relationship with food became. Eating really fast, trying to just get whatever I could into my body to chart, lots of takeout, um, groceries that would go bad in the fridge because I would be gone at a birth for a long time. And the ways that I really learned how to take care of myself through all those years working in the garden and learning from the elders there, as I became a midwife, that became less and less accessible to me. And as well, becoming pregnant and being a midwife as well, those things, but becoming pregnant, it drew me even further away and forced me to reflect on what my relationship with food is and how it has been shifting over the years. But really, I had to come back to this teaching that I had when I was 16, which is that food is medicine. And I was forced to really look at food again. And that was something that I learned from one of our elders, Lee Brown, was that if you don't listen to illness, if you don't listen to your body one day, the messaging is going to keep coming back, and you're going to be forced to listen. And that was what my pregnancy was for me. This little baby, this little being really brought those teachings back to me, and uplifted my relationship with food again. And so a big part of what I think is important about relationship to food is this idea of food sovereignty, which is a term I heard over and over again at the gardens, which basically is having the power to choose our own relationships to food, having access to the foods we want, having access to the foods we need. That might be being able to go hunting, knowing where the berry patches are, having relationships with our families who are teaching us the protocols and the ways to gather food and medicine. It might mean having enough money to go to the grocery store. It might mean having different kinds of grocery stores in your community. It might be having food prices that are actually accessible, and so on and so forth. This idea of food sovereignty encompasses a lot and really just has to do with choice. And that's something as well in birth work that I think about a lot is so many of us don't have choice when it comes to accessing healthcare during our births. And sovereignty is such a it can be a hard thing to focus on, but it can be also an empowering thing for us to focus on in both the areas of food and birth. And of course, our sovereignty has been impacted by colonization. So food security in particular, that's just even having access to food at all, like reliable access to healthy foods. Um, I feel like this is something that impacts most of us. And it is a human right. And for many of us, our stories all center around our relationship to food, our relationship to land. It is the center of who we are. And that's what I've learned through our stories is that actually food is the backbone of everything we do in our lives and in our relationships with one another. I had notes and I haven't even looked at them at all. Hopefully I'm saying all the things that I had planned to say. So one of the elders I grew up with at the farm, her name was Peggy, and we actually wrote a cookbook together. I was hoping to show it today, but because we're not at home, I don't have a copy of it with me. But when I was 18, I worked with Vancouver Native Health and the elders there to put together a cookbook of the recipes that we were using at the farm, and it really centered around this idea of food sovereignty. And Peggy shared the story of when she didn't have anything in the cupboards, didn't have anything in the fridge, what she would do to make a really good meal for her family. And she grew up in a housette and where the ocean and the beach was her fridge, and that changed over the years as she came to the city. And she talked about having like a jar of fish and just finding like the bottom of the cereal box or the bottom of the cracker box and putting it all together to make these delicious salmon cakes. So we ate them a lot at the farm and they were so good. And I really just appreciated that creativity as a child and relating to the idea of looking in the cupboards and trying to find something to eat and not knowing what I was going to eat, but also like really as a child wanting to eat enjoyable foods. And so I love that our people are so creative and know how to make delicious meals even if there's not much in the cupboard. And so I was just thinking about Peggy's salmon cake recipe. And then food in pregnancy and postpartum. These relationships to food can really shift. First trimester, it's really a practice of being gentle with ourselves, nausea, food aversions, also feeling scared, like what can you eat, what can't you eat, and feeling excited. Okay, I think this idea of that it's important to eat and get nutrients is really well understood for all of us, but it's a lot of pressure. And so there's prenatal vitamins. Which prenatal vitamins do you take? Which make you sick? There's a lot to navigate with food, and I think a lot of people do end up feeling guilty in their relationship with food in the first trimester because some of the standards that have been set feel unattainable, and then it's really about survival, if not in the first trimester, in the whole pregnancy. And so I just also have been reflecting on this idea of being gentle with ourselves when it comes to food, and knowing that we come from people who survive, and many of us come from ancestors who didn't have food security, didn't have food sovereignty for at least a generation or two into now. And at the same time, we come from histories of abundance and of sustainable caretaking. And so really being gentle and patient with ourselves, especially in the first trimester, feels so important. And then gestational diabetes is something a lot of people navigate, learning to digest sugar and relate to sugar in new ways, iron deficiency, which is something I'm going to talk about more in this presentation, and postpartum recovery. My friend Danette just texted me, I think she's here right now, about Egg McMuffins. And when I was in first trimester, I really could only eat like deep fried hash browns. I could only stomach like the most random, most well, it reminded me of going back to being a child. And I kind of think that too, like sometimes first trimester is a big time for bland foods. And a lot of elders I've known really like simple foods with like simple flavor. And that was kind of what I was feeling for in my first trimester. But yeah, at the end of the day, I was like, whatever I can get in to my body, whatever calories I can get in, I'll be happy. And I really, I have this privilege of being a midwife and having lots of birth knowledge. And I was really shocked at every step of the way in my pregnancy and postpartum time with how much food impacted me in every way. And this is an oatmeal bowl that was being made for me by my friend Sophie and my partner almost all the time in postpartum that I was basically keeping me going, eating it in bed there. Someone brought us huckleberries in the postpartum, so grateful for that too. So iron deficiency, it really is one of the most focused on nutrients in pregnancy and postpartum. And a lot of this has to do with sharing blood with the baby, expecting there to be blood loss at the birth, which a certain amount of blood loss is really normal at a birth. There are contemporary strategies to building iron back. So oral iron supplementation, which of course makes people feel really sick a lot of the time. And IV iron supplementation. And then I was learning through NCIM about this iron fish, which I've heard of before, but we were having a conversation with the folks at the Lucky Iron Fish brand, and they were telling us about cooking with that iron fish, and it actually puts iron into your food. And so for a lot of folks who don't eat meat, that could be a really beneficial option as well. Cooking with a cast iron pan does something similar as well. So those are useful tools. But we also, I always come back to how did we manage this before colonization, before iron pills, before iron IVs, and try to think about the creativity of our ancestors and their relationship to the land. This is just a picture of Pitt Lake, and there's some thimbleberry bushes there, and it's a beautiful day there. There's probably lots of medicines there that could help with iron. And plant medicine, so kind of full circle. For me, learning about plant medicines as a teenager and a young adult, going to midwifery school, doing my pharmacology, to be quite honest, feeling like a dummy in my pharmaceutical class, finding it so hard, and then putting all my focus on trying to become a good registered midwife, graduating, and then realizing, wait, what about plant medicines? What about this knowledge? And feeling like now I'm relearning everything again. And we had a gathering in BC for the Indigenous midwives here, and Neelock's mom, Della, came and did some work with us, and it really just made my heart sing, and just was really important to our family to be around Della's teachings. And even just making this PowerPoint, reminding myself to slow down, and maybe I should drive out and go and visit Della. And really wanting to return back to my roots, as it were, that started me off on this work. And always remembering plant medicines is the foundation for all of the pharmaceuticals today. A lot of that knowledge is actually stolen from Indigenous people and bottled and sold. And despite that, plant medicines are more powerful in a lot of ways. And I think one thing I often forget is this idea of preventative medicine, and that's also something that plant medicines can offer us. So nettle tea is nettles are one of my favorite plants, and every year I go and try to harvest them. I have alopecia, so at any given time in my life, I either have hair or no hair, and I was taught I could rub the nettles on my head to give myself a little sting to help the hair grow. And so I actually have learned to really love doing that. And I know other people do that for arthritis or different things to get the blood flowing in their body. But nettle tea is a really good one for pregnancy and postpartum. And it's also a traditional food where I come from. And I love that it's so versatile and so accessible, and that relationship with iron and building iron back up. And we also have plant medicines that can help manage bleeding during birth and postpartum. And that's something I think important to remember too, when we're so used to, as registered midwives, relying on pharmaceuticals at different points in the pregnancy and birth, that actually traditionally we would have had plant relationships that could help us, and food relationships that could help us. I think of this as our technology and our innovation. And it continues on today, being built by generation and generation, a discipline that's becoming stronger and stronger. And as I said before, I really think there's always more to learn when it comes to plant medicines. And food is medicine. Foods can also help us manage our iron and obviously other nutrients in the pregnancy. Our traditional diets were often, diets that they centered around sustainable harvesting, but they also really they also were really, I think, when I think about a traditional diet, they were foods that made us feel good. And I've been thinking about that a lot too, is there's foods that are supposed to make us feel good, and then there's foods that we notice like right away or as the weeks go by that these foods are actually making us feel good. And when it comes to iron deficiency, I notice that with my clients, whether they're supplementing or doing other things that are bringing their iron up, they really start to notice their energy and how they're feeling and their body starts to improve, and it's something tangible. And I think food as medicine really has the power to do that, to give us tangible, good feelings. And there's like so many ways that foods can be healthy for us, mind, body, spirit. I back to the preventative medicine piece. As I mentioned before, I have an autoimmune disorder, and so my body will literally speak to me, and I'm still learning about that relationship, but I've noticed how much of a role food plays in how I'm feeling in my body. And comfort foods, which I'll talk a little bit about later. Comfort foods always come up for me. Foods that remind me of different points in my life, and foods that make me feel good, soul foods. So I've heard some people say Indigenous soul foods. So it goes beyond just what we're kind of told is healthy, but also what just gives us comfort. That is medicine. Comfort is medicine. And so there's no right or wrong when it comes to how we relate to food as medicine. But I think there is an issue with equity. And so there is an equitable access to food right now. So that does create barriers into how we use food as medicine. And it just gives us another opportunity to be creative, like our elders and our ancestors. Food harvesting is something I was thinking about a lot in preparing for this presentation. Food harvesting I just felt so good when I was in the garden and picking medicines. And it's something I really don't do a lot of anymore. But I'm planning to change that. My baby might need, speaking of food as medicine, my baby might need food at some point. I'm gonna take, yeah, I can take her. Just tell me if I need to stop talking, and I will. And harvesting nettles in my pregnancy felt really profound, like such a big gift, because I had a very busy pregnancy working a lot. And it definitely made me realize the benefits in a deeper way, and also made me realize what I was missing just from not having food harvesting being a regular part of my life anymore. Feeling connected to the land, either where I come from or where I am, learning about where we come from through being on the land, the same places that my ancestors walked on. Physical activity. I did a lot of learning about glucose, like gestational diabetes management and gestational diabetes prevention, and learning about timing little walks and how that can help with blood glucose. And so food harvesting also provides that. Putting your hands in the soil and eating berries off the bush, that helps with your microbiome, which is such an important part of birth, of skin to skin, of relating to each other during that time that babies come into the world. And even for GBS management, it isn't evidence-based, but it probably is evidence-based that food harvesting would actually help with GBS. I wouldn't be surprised. And then also self-esteem related to that idea of sovereignty, relying on ourselves, and how good that feels to not have to rely on a grocery store. And it really is a tool that can help fight systemic racism. In my practice, we've done a lot of fighting with health authorities, with systems, trying to ask for what we deserve, not feeling seen in the systems. It's really tiring. I think, becomes a waste of energy if that fight isn't leading to somewhere positive for our clients. And being out on the land and food harvesting is one way to just bypass all of that BS and and be able to take care of ourselves. And that is something that I think the benefits of that can't be said enough. And this leads me to the most important part of my presentation. Hey, babe, do you think you could take her? I think it's you.
Yeah, I got her.
So, just to tie it all together, my great grandma was one of my biggest role models to me growing up. And I just noticed how everyone in my family would talk about her and how important she was and how she took care of everyone. And one of the things that was told to me over and over again is how good she was at making a roast. And why this is so important is because she was blind. She went blind when she was 29, and she had to go to her parents' house and relearn how to do everything so that she could have her autonomy, her sovereignty, her self-reliance. And that was something that was really important and is really important in our family, is not having to rely on other people for better or for worse. So she went and she learned how to use a wood stove, and she went back living in the bush with her kids and was able to make the best roast and all sorts of foods using her wood fire oven. And somewhere along the way, I started making roasts for some of my clients in the postpartum. It just became an idea of something that was nourishing, blood building, responded to iron, responded to comfort foods, at least for me, and was something I could share that came and tied together all of my teachings from the different places I come from. And so apologies if meat isn't your thing for this picture. And this is something I've really wanted to offer to all of my clients, and it hasn't been possible because of the volume that I need to work in, especially in the city. But sharing this meal and kind of having a moment to exhale all together, the birth team and the family, it allowed us to share the birth story. It allowed me to learn what parts of my care that I provided to the family was good for them, was meaningful. What do they need now moving forward? I kind of use this joke of the end of Mary Poppins where she flies away with her umbrella. And I feel like I get to that point with my clients where I'm like, they don't need me anymore. I just need to float into the wind. I have nothing more to offer them. And oftentimes I'll make the postpartum roast around that time when everyone's sort of feeling good and a little bit more energized, just to kind of mark the end of my midwifery care and the beginning of my role as an auntie for the family. And yeah, and someone made us a postpartum roast in our postpartum. We had a lot of support, which I was really grateful for, from our extended community. And I remember feeling guilty again. This idea of self-reliance can go to toxic extremes. And I was feeling like I was saying to one of my friends, "You're doing too much for us. This is like unbelievable." And she said, "Well, this is what you did for me." And I was like, "No, I didn't. I didn't do this for you." And she was like, "Yes, this is exactly what you did for me." And it really helped me understand the power of birth work, just experiencing that reciprocity, because I didn't think what I was doing as a midwife or as a doula or as an auntie was that big of a deal. But it really felt like a big deal to receive that care. And this was something too that came up for me in my reflections on food and birth, is the bedside table. I spent a lot of time in bed in my building a baby times, and both like in the pregnancy and in the postpartum. And also just thinking for elders and end of life as well, this is such an important tool, because there can be lots of time spent in bed or in a chair, and the bedside table is a site of care that we can focus on that also feels to me accessible. So I think lots of people can relate. It kind of gets hard to feed yourself in the postpartum, and so some of our care team would leave food at the bedside table, water and tea, and that just really saved me in the learning how to feed the baby phase and not being as mobile. And now it's something I'm doing at the hospital, is looking at the side table. What's there? Is there water there? Is there nourishing foods available? And it's something, yeah, that I think is a useful tool. And I couldn't talk about food as medicine in a midwife's forum without thinking about feeding the baby, breastfeeding, chest feeding, and just just how much of a big deal it is. And one thing I often think about, I really experienced this too with my experience of feeding my baby, is it couldn't be something I did alone. I mean, it could, but it really helped to rely on other people as a network who fed the baby. And that can happen through other ways of feeding the baby, like formula, and even now introducing solids to babies. Like there is a network that goes to our foods, whether it's breastfeeding or eating food off the table. And I think about that blood memory and ancestral intelligence that babies are born into the world with around food, knowing, wanting and knowing different ways to eat and searching for food. I forget where I learned this from, but someone was saying that the reason we love sugar so much is it's one of the least occurring tastes in the environment. And of course, we really do need sugar as part of our survival. And so we're actually hardwired to love the taste of sugar, and when we find berries, to really enjoy it. And I just think about that too, like our bodies have so much intelligence that came from our ancestors. And food is hard work from the moment babies are born to the end of our lives. Food is hard work. It's the reason why we leave the house in the morning to put food on the table for our families. If you're a birth worker, you know feeding yourself is really hard. And you know, like thinking about food science is so important. And back to that idea of harvesting and putting your hands in the dirt. And I've thought a lot about bacteria as well in my reflections on food and birth, uh and how when we do skin to skin with our parents or with our extended family, we're actually picking up the bacteria off of their bodies, and that becomes part of our microbiome. And if we have kids or nephews and nieces, we're actually passing on that bacteria to them when we're doing skin to skin or when we're holding them. And if you think back how many thousands of years those little bacteria that make up that millions of parts of us have traveled. I don't know in my lifetime that I'll have the ability to do any research on that, or whether that would even be appropriate. But I think it's an amazing thing to reflect on in terms of this spiritual and physical connection that links us for both to our land and to thousands of generations. And there's co-regulation in how we feed each other. I really, I've really enjoyed breastfeeding my baby. I've had a really positive experience. I find it helps me slow down as someone who's used to being really busy, and that I find it a form of co-regulation when we have moments in our day where we just slow down to be with each other. And it's similar to how I feel sharing a meal with the people I love. If we can slow down and sit at the table and share a good meal together, I also feel regulation from that. And I think that that's a really important medicine for me and maybe for some of you as well. So I'll end the presentation with some food inspo pics. The pic on the far left is something my doula made for me, a meal I would have never thought of. It was lentils and rice and carrots and onions and lemon zest and a beautiful sauce that she made that was like just felt so nourishing and comforting. A little while ago, I got quite sick and I called my auntie and she said, make a chicken soup from scratch. And in my mind, I was like, I'm too sick for this. But I ended up doing it, and we just drank this pot of soup for until it was gone, and we gave some to the baby in a bottle, some of the stock, and we got better really fast. This is a lactation cookie recipe that Danette showed me that I found really comforting and helpful in the postpartum, with a cup of red raspberry leaf tea, some nectarines and cream, which is when I got pregnant and I determined that the due date was going to be in July. The first thing I thought of was nectarines. And so I got to have some nectarines, and I was kind of like whatever the Bridezilla version in postpartum is around sausage rolls. I was like, I just need, no other food appeals to me. I need sausage rolls. And so I really enjoyed having my sausage rolls. Sausage rolls are something I ate a lot with my grandma as a kid. And she recently told me that it was something her dad actually made her. So that was something I didn't know. And maybe that's why it was so important to me in the postpartum. And here's just a pic of Temia in those first weeks and a lasagna that someone dropped off for us. Just trying to eat in the short naps. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Keisha, for that insightful presentation. Hi, Tamia. And so we'll share some of the raffle winners. And so our first raffle prize is an amazing collection of books, all written by Indigenous authors to inspire your creativity. Beautiful, beautiful collection.
All right, I'm going to jump on with my audio here and I will share my screen in a second. And I'm going to let folks know that if you have any motion sickness, maybe not watch the screen directly because there are a lot of names in our spinner. And I find the colors go pretty fast. So let's see who our first winner is. All right, so we have Becky Wood. So if Becky Wood is in the chat or at your watch party, can you please either email me, that's our green at Indigenous Midwifery, or let us know in the chat so we can connect with you. Again, Becky Wood, thank you.
Congratulations, Becky. Those are some amazing books. And so we will take this time prior to our next presentation to have a short 5-minute break. Welcome back, everyone. We're going to continue with the forum, and our final presentation will be Circle of Aunties, the sustainability of wraparound support for families beyond birth. This presentation will be brought to us by Lori Inkster and Nadia Houle. I will start by introducing Lori and then Nadia. Lori Inkster is in a team Miskwak, and her ancestors came from the Red River settlement in Manitoba. She is a member of the Otipemisiwak Métis government of the Métis Nation within Alberta. Lori is a co-director, cultural helper, auntie, and mentor with Canoe Awasis Wakamik Cultural Society. She has been supporting families during times of transitions from birth to the journey back to the spirit world for more than 35 years. Her work focuses on healing, sovereignty, reawakening cultural knowledge, strengthening kinship, and increasing confidence amongst family and community members to support one another during times of transition. Lori co-leads the Kistaneka Ta Kimikansam project, starting in response to the identification of children's graves at former Indian residential school sites. She is also the auntie and a co-facilitator of the Sexual Assault Center of Edmonton's Whipson's Healing Circle. Lori resides in Wishkanakan, close to her 2 grown children. Her traditional knowledge is learning from elders, knowledge keepers, and other community members. Her Western education includes a Bachelor of Arts and Master of Divinity training from DONA, the Doulas of North America, and a variety of other community organizations. Lori, I apologize for any of that pronunciation. And next we have Nadia Houle, who is a mixed race, Mahikwa Iskew, with her ancestral lands originating around Spirit River and Dawson Creek in the Northern Treaty 8 territory. She is a member of the Otimimiskwak Métis government of the Métis Nation within Alberta. Nadia is a doctor of acupuncture, a cultural birth worker, auntie, and a mentor. She is the co-founder, co-director, and visionary of Kinyu Awasis Nakimik Cultural Society. Nadia has been providing childbirth education, pregnancy, birth, and parenting support for over 20 years throughout the Treaty 6 territory. Her acupuncture, traditional medicines, and ceremonial teachings are naturally woven into the care she provides, while also mentoring community members to begin their journey to relearning how to support their own family through a traditional lens within a modern context. Nadia lives and resides in the Amishikawakas with her partner and their blended family of 8, where they are known in the ceremony community as helpers. Her traditional teachings have come from her relatives, elders, and knowledge keepers. Her Western education includes a BSc in kinesiology, a diploma of acupuncture, and birthwork training from the Doulas of North America, Native Youth Sexual Health Network, and Blue Quills University Maternal Support Program. Over to you, beautiful ladies.
Hi, Neela. Thank you for that. I'd just like to say that when Maria Campbell says that she's nervous about starting, I can feel that. And I was sharing with Lori, I think it's more the technology piece, because the attendees here are so many beautiful colleagues of ours, sisters of ours, and I'm so grateful. I wish we were in person so I could feel all of you around us. Lori and I are here today to talk about our work, the work that we do, the work that we support over the last 6 or so years together within our society, talking about the sustainability with wraparound support for Indigenous families. We're hoping that what we're sharing today displays how the work we're doing is very similar actually to how Maria was describing how things used to be. Everybody helped out, everybody had a role. We came together and the midwives had that integral role in the community. But we're also hoping to highlight what we've seen in our families and our communities with providing that work. So our Kihiwasis Cultural Society has been in existence since about 2016, but formally registered in 2022. So we've come together over the years to reawaken, revitalize those traditional pathways of building confidence and gathering knowledge so that our families have everything that they need to navigate their journey through those major life transitions. Our membership is made up of aunties, midwives, grandmothers, some community members, and we've all come together. I wish I could remember the name, Maria, coming together for that common understanding and common interest in this work and sharing with the community. There's a variety of ways that our society does work together. In frontline work, in working with local organizations, healthcare professionals, running mentorship programs, running prenatal circles, and we're happy to be here today as adding this as one of our places to share with our colleagues and our communities about the work that we do.
You put the slides up, Nadia, please. Thank you. Tadze Kakyo Nwagamaгаnek. I'm going to share a little bit about some of the core teachings, values, principles that guide the work that we do that have been shared with us from the Kitayak in our communities, and also from our families who are our biggest teachers in the work that we do. So you'll notice that quite a few of these are Neheo language words. We're also, as Maria was saying, doing our best to work on reclaiming our language. And so wanting to share with you those words that have been shared with us. I think Nadia's having a little trouble with getting our presentation going. So maybe one of the tech people can help her out. I think we have a backup option. It's okay. So one of the principal teachings that is guiding our work is the need for healing in our communities. And we've already heard lots today about the reasons why many of our peoples are on a healing journey. And it's all related to the colonial experiences that we've had as Indigenous peoples in our families and in our communities. And so that's impacted our aunties who are doing the work, as well as the families that we're walking alongside and serving. And so our healing journeys parallel the healing work that the families that we're supporting are experiencing and doing on their own behalf as well. And that's very necessary for us to be able to do the work in a good way so that our own unhealed experiences that we carry don't become something that interferes with our ability to support our families in a good way. And also for the families that we're supporting who are working on their own intergenerational healing. And so these teachings that I'm sharing with you today are all interconnected. We've listed them out separately, but we find that all of this work, all of these teachings are very much interconnected. The idea of mio-pamatsuin, this is a good life, having a good life, rediscovering for ourselves as Indigenous people what a good life is, what it can look like and feel like and be all about. And this is different for everyone. And it's self-determined. Indigenous peoples have experienced the imposition of a Western or colonized perspective on a good life. And so we're reclaiming our own teachings and perspectives and our own ability to make decisions for ourselves, what mio-pamatsuin looks like for ourselves, for our children, for the intergenerational relationships and all other relationships that we have in our communities. Otapamsuin is about self-sovereignty or self-leadership or being the boss of ourselves. This is about our autonomy, being in charge of our own decisions in every area of our life. So that would include health decisions that we're making, our own well-being in all 4 dimensions of our being, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, and spiritually as well. And it also includes our social well-being the relationships that we have, our experiences within the legal system, or parenting our children, or involvement from other Western systems, which could be child and family services, or the healthcare system, our own financial well-being. We already heard about food sovereignty, so that's a piece of our Otapamsuan as well. How we choose to parent, how we birth, how we're experiencing our journey back to the spirit world. Every area of our life and our being, having sovereignty and the capacity to make sovereign decisions for ourselves and on behalf of our little ones who might be depending on us to make decisions for them as they're growing as well. With Chatawin, this is about having good relationships with other people, having the ability to ask for help and receive help, and helping one another. Wakotowin is about that wider circle of relationships that we have, good relations with all of the other non-human beings that we're in relationship with, the seen and the unseen world. Reconnecting to the land and to our traditions through culture and ceremony and the teachings of our Kiteayak. And then relying on those helpers that we have all around us, our older brothers and sisters, the medicines, all of the seen and unseen helpers that are part of the world around us, that are there to help us in our journey here in this earth world. Kinship and belonging are important, and guiding principles or teachings or needs that we see in our families. Many families disconnected from culture and kin, fractured kinship systems. Many families where children have been removed sometimes for generations from the care of their parents. So working on the restoration of our kinship systems, which was traditionally just a part of the ways that we lived our life and how we were raised, and it includes how we parented our children, knowing how to parent our children and surround them with the culture and the teachings that are part of their family's inheritance, that blood memory. And so working and supporting our families to be able to access the teachings and the culture that are part of their families and communities, and walking alongside them as they do that work of reawakening and reclaiming. And all of that is guided by natural law, teaching, ceremony, and Kiteac, as I've said a few times. Nadia, is there anything you want to add?
So as Laurie's described how our society has set out its grounding work, everything that we are based in, how we show up in community, and how we show up in our families. As we were forming our society and thinking about how to do this work, I think as many of the people here have experienced and heard the stories of how our families are treated and their response and their reflections on their journeys. We got approached by a project that was happening 2 years ago called the Alberta Perinatal Equity Project. And they were actually wanting to do this to understand the barriers that Indigenous people, or barriers that pregnant people faced, and they were working with us to understand the Indigenous perspective and experiences. So we thought we would share, we did some circles together with them, with our families that we had worked with. And so some interesting quotes here for you to read about the needs, the experiences of our people. And this is kind of setting the stage of why we do the work that we do, very similar to a lot of you that are here. We were trying to understand the common experiences, trying to show common experiences, understanding the Western systems trauma that happens, highlighting the Indigenous worldview about coming together during these transitional times like pregnancy and birth, to understand the need for connection and kinship, how our people traditionally would function, and also this piece of sovereign birthing and sovereignty over our bodies. There is a full infographic that was going to be put in the resource section during this presentation. It shows kind of the outcomes that came from our involvement with this project. So who are we as the Aunties? We strive to move beyond the westernized role that people call doula now. Myself and Lori both have provided that kind of doula support for many, many years. And what I came to know when I started doing work within the community was that the doula training that was offered from most of the Western education systems it wasn't enough. It wasn't relatable. It didn't bring forth all of the things that were needed. And even just how they worked. Traditionally we would come together as a community. And so our role really is in this Auntie support is to come together and call together a circle of support for the family. We are there to help break down barriers, reduce barriers for families to access resources. We're there to mitigate any incidences of racism that might be happening, to mitigate power imbalances that happen so often in the healthcare field and social services and the legal system. Our role is also this two-eyed seeing. So we're there to understand traditionally what our role is as a support person, as an Indigenous person, but we're also there to understand the challenges that our families face today, which is including things such as, the impacts that colonialism has had on us, understanding addictions and recovery, understanding houselessness, food insecurity and trauma and grief. Those things are not uncommon in in the work that we do when we're working with families. Our Aunties are also involved in developing relationships that they don't already with ceremony. Understanding that ceremony is just not something that we talk about, but it's actually a part of our life. We're often helpers at the ceremonies. A lot of folks are participating. That's a lot of our encouragement for self-care, taking care of ourselves, getting knowledge when we're fasting, asking for prayers. I can imagine I'm not the only one, taking protocol to the ceremonies and sun dancing and committing to Sundance and committing to fast, asking for help and asking for guidance. And also opening those pathways for families who don't have access to ceremony, making it accessible in any way possible. If it's something from, just smudging to, maybe they want to ask for a pipe ceremony for their family. Maybe they want to go to some kind of ceremony, maybe, just going to a round dance, experiencing powwow, making regalia, all of those things. Our Aunties also are folks who have life experience. They've birthed babies, they've supported people who have birthed babies. And knowing our Aunties have a full spectrum, right? So it's not just about birth, but it's also about that full range from rites of passage all the way up to that journey home. So our Aunties have experience with all of that, and have experienced teachings in some form from our knowledge holders and our Kadayak. Our Aunties also provide mentorship. So that's how we saw traditionally. You heard Maria talk about that first great-grandchild or that grandchild that would go live with one of their chapans or their grandparents to learn. And so that's part of our coming together, is learning from each other. building our bundles, but also really understanding the Western knowledge, understanding terminology, policies. And so that takes requirement with building relationships with not only our knowledge keepers and elders, but also with healthcare professionals and some academia. And so it's a very awesome role of difficult, but awesome of bridging two worlds together, carrying those teachings forward, but also feeling confident in sitting in conversations or sitting at the table with folks who are making policy or anything like that. But it's such a privileged role. So our aunties are a wealth of knowledge from a variety of aspects.
So how we work on getting there is through wraparound support. We've found that the families that we're supporting and our own families too, during times of big transition, really benefit from having wraparound support. And so that can be when a baby's arriving or when there's a very sick family member or somebody's journeying home to the spirit world, or in between the arriving and the leaving, those times of big transition where we're experiencing, maybe if we have a womb, the start of our moon time, or our voice is breaking, or later in life when those the visit of our grandmother is coming to an end, and the rites of passage that are associated with those times of big transition. Having wraparound support for the people who are experiencing those transitions and the ones who are closest to them is very beneficial. And so the result of providing that wraparound support that we've noticed is that it starts to revitalize our traditional kinship systems. And so this is about recognizing that everybody in our communities used to have a role very similar to what Maria was talking about earlier this morning, that the midwives had an important role to play, but that the aunties and the cookums and the other members of the community would all know what their role was, that the children would know what their role was during that time, and what the older people in their communities were doing. And people knew how to care for and support one another. And so part of revitalizing our traditional kinship systems is that work of relearning the confidence and the skill and the knowledge to be able to support one another in the ways that we did in our communities before there was so much interruption and criminalization of our knowledge and practices because of colonialism. And once that knowledge transmission restarts, we've noticed that it happens on a horizontal level and also a vertical level. And so by horizontal, I mean that we have noticed that once a person or their family has experienced some wraparound support, when they have a family member or a relative who's going through a similar transition or experience that they've experienced themselves, maybe their cousin is having a baby, and so now they're thinking about, how can I support my cousin in the ways that I receive support myself? And we've had so many beautiful examples already today during the forum of ways that families can receive support, including in the ways that they're supported to receive nourishing food and have it right at their bedside during that time. And so those family and friends are sharing that knowledge. They're sharing their confidence. They're providing some guidance to their own relatives and family members. And so there's this transition that happens through across the current generation in the community, but there's also a retransmission of knowledge that happens down through the generations to come. So babies coming into the world, hearing the songs of their parents, their language of their people as their first words that they hear, surrounded by the burning of the medicines being put in a bundle or a waspisun, a moss bag, we call that on our territory here, being swung in a wee whipson, having parents who are practicing traditional parenting and from the very get-go raising their babies to be balanced in all dimensions of their being at the same time and caring for them as they develop these little beings in their care, develop and grow. Having that connection with kin and being surrounded by aunties and supported by other relatives in the family who may or may not be blood, but who are showing up in healthy ways and walking alongside them. And so that transmission and that healing that happens starts to be embedded in that family because it's normalized for those little ones as they grow up. And so then when they have little ones, that's how they care for and provide for their families when their little ones are coming into the world. And also the healing goes backward through the generations to those who came before us, our Kokums and our Japans and our family back through the generations behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also being mindful of our own limits and practicing our own self-care and asking for help from community members as we do this work so that we know that not only are our families being cared for in a good way, but that we're being looked after, looking after ourselves in a good way so that there's sustainability in doing the work.
So it might sound familiar to some of you. This might be something new, but it's a beautiful thing. Kind of the technical pieces of how we work as a group, as a society, is that we there are pieces that we are doing a little bit different than traditional roles. So Lori's going to spend a few minutes to kind of talk about those.
So we work in a mentorship model, which is, we've been trying to find an English word that captures that way of learning that we had in our communities where we came into the world and early on we were identified as having a particular role in our community, certain gifts, and then we would be raised up in that knowledge and in those gifts from a very young age. And so sometimes if it was maybe, well, in this case, a midwife, somebody was identified as they were going to be a midwife. They had come into the world gifted to be a midwife. And so then they would be raised up and they would follow the older midwives in their community for years and years and years. And they would learn by watching and by helping. And so we have a mentorship program, Kitsi Ogami mo Eske Teo, Sacred Grandmother Fire Mentorship Program. And so the people who come into our mentorship program, they have the opportunity to come alongside and help the more senior or experienced aunties and sometimes the cookums in the community and the work that they're doing after they've spent a couple of years adding to their own knowledge bundles and building their confidence and working on their own medicine wheel and being in balance and working on their own healing journey. And then we work in teams. So we work to share our caseloads, and that way we know that our families will have continuity of care. If one of our aunties is not able to be with them when a baby is arriving or in the postpartum or during the prenatal period, might not be able to attend all of the conversations that are happening, we know that they have a relationship with the other aunties in their team. And so there's continuity of care and there's a level of comfort and familiarity with all of the aunties on their team, and we can switch in and out. And it also gives us the ability to look after ourselves and our own family members when things come up, as it does in life. And part of our practice of sharing caseloads and working together on a team is having a weekly case debrief where we gather together online like this at the beginning of the week, and we share updates and plan for what care might look like for our families in the week to come, or looking a little further ahead. And we support one another with the space to debrief experiences that we may have had, to strategize together, to share knowledge, and to provide some guidance to our younger aunties who are it's still in their mentorship time. We work hard to develop safe relationships amongst our team. Lots of communication between our team members, updating each other on what's happening when we're having visits with families, updating each other on where we're at so that we know what's up for our team members and who's available to be providing support. And also safe relationships with the families that we're supporting so that we get to know the story, the bigger picture story of what's happening for them, and we can support them in safe referrals to care providers and community resources. We work together to assess their care needs and bridge any gaps that they might have in the care that they're receiving. We have noticed, and probably many of you have as well, that many care providers work in silos. And so we might be calling together a circle of care to fill in gaps and strengthen the supports that families have around them. That can be natural supports as well as professional supports. And then understanding their whole story and sharing that with their circle of supports help everybody to understand the causes of historical instability that those families have experienced in the past. And that may be part of the cycles that they're of trauma that they're experiencing, and we can support them in shifting. And also understanding their limits, their capacity limits, and the barriers that they experience. And so that we can make sure that's understood in the whole circle of supports as well. Highlighting their medicine wheel, all dimensions of their being is being cared for, and then supporting connection to ceremony and elders and culture and community in all of the ways that those families are hoping to be connected in. And so part of the circle of supports that we're working with is often care providers from other Western systems and sometimes other Indigenous folks who are providing support alongside the work that we do. So Nadia is going to speak a little bit about who it is that we are often working alongside.
Yeah, so we often come into conversation or needing to reach out to a variety of people that are working with the family. And like Lori mentioned, it can be anything from the grandmother, the partner, the parent of that birthing person, or the person who may be experiencing supporting a loved one who might be journeying back to the spirit world. And so you can imagine there's been some trials and tribulations as a auntie coming on and trying to get together folks like, caseworkers who are often social workers dedicated to one case on within Child and Family Services, working together with midwives, doctors, which include, specialists like the obstetrician or neonatologists, and the health nurses who may be at the hospital or in community or working at a specific organization. Oftentimes we are reaching out to or having conversation with housing workers. It also includes folks such as, even food supports like the food bank, mental health and addictions counselors. So not only are we working alongside them, but like Lori mentioned, we try to remove working in silos so that we are all on the same page. We are all coming together to center around this family, making sure that there's no gaps in between. Because often we know, we know the midwives, we know all the workers, healthcare providers, everybody's really busy. And so sometimes that's all that's on their forefront is that. And so as aunties, our role is to where the natural supports end and those professional supports end. We're filling the gap in between all of that, because we know a lot of families can dip and fall into those gaps, and sometimes they can be very costly for that family. And so now the beautiful part that what we've seen as a shift in our families by providing this consistent wraparound support to them.
So we have had the beautiful experience of witnessing many families staying together where maybe there was some struggles. Child and Family Services may have been involved, legal system may have been involved, struggles with all of the impacts that we see because of the trauma that lingers in our families from the experiences that we've had from colonization. And so families taking this journey with good wraparound support and connection to culture and ceremony and community. And we've seen children coming back into the care of their parents and staying together over time. We've witnessed intergenerational healing cycles starting to be identified and addressed, shifted. We see older children in the families making different choices. We see parents parenting differently. We see folks at the end of their journey here in this earth world being supported differently as their families walk alongside them. And we see folks taking a grief journey in a different way than they've been able to in the past with good support around them. We see families with a strengthened circle of support. And we see the passing on of knowledge in families to support their own family members and community members, and weaving culture and traditions into their everyday life, and sharing what they've learned with other community members so that they can have the same experiences. And then we see families who have been open to receiving support, experiencing increased confidence in how they practice sovereignty in their own lives and how they support other family members and their children, their own parents, to practice sovereignty and seek out support and make decisions for themselves that feel good and are right for them. And of course, some of the work of that is connecting to and experiencing the care of midwifery as they discover that option for themselves and choose it. And then they're sharing with their pregnant friends that that's an option, and helping them get connected to that kind of care as well. And so that's part of the way that our midwifery practices are reawakening in our communities, is through the experiences of families who experience something that is good for them or different, better than what they experienced before with different kinds of care, and then sharing those experiences amongst their networks, and then their friends and family members are choosing that for themselves as well. Is there anything you wanted to add just as we wrap up here, Nadia, and leave a few minutes for questions?
Yeah, I just wanted to share some practical viewpoints of this shift that we see in families. And, to put it into perspective for folks watching, is that we have an intake number of about 60 to 70 families a year. Not all of those families want support at their to be on call. Then not all of them want us to be on call. Some of them just need help navigating a healthcare provider, navigating maybe some diapers or clothes or anything like that. So some of them are smaller levels of support, but in the grand scheme of things, I would say about 80%, maybe closer to 90 of the folks that we do support have midwifery care. And it just, every year we just notice that people are coming to us saying, I would like a midwife. Before, it was us saying, have you heard of midwifery? Like was mentioned before with, I think it was Rita, when it was talking about midwifery with some folks, that they just were like, had no idea what a midwife was, or didn't know that there was any midwives nowadays. And so So it's become quite amazing, and it makes me really emotional to think. Just recently, we've had so many young people reaching out for support, and they're having their babies out of hospital. You know, they're healthy enough for that option, but it is profound. And you know, we support families who make whatever choice, but because the sovereignty is what's important. But at our APEP, at those circles that we were doing, I think about 90% of the parents that were there were sitting there feeding their babies. And I just, you know, there was just so many moments of all the things that we hear those Kadayaks speak about that I see it happening. Some things are still really difficult and awful, but there's this thing that's happening that we talk about, that sustainability. Our goal as aunties is to wean ourselves off of support, because that family has built up that nest around them. They have built up confidence to reach out when they need help. And that they're supporting their own families. I was at a birth probably almost 3 years ago, where the auntie that was there supporting that parent, we had supported her 4 years prior to that. And I said to her, look at this, you're here supporting her now, you know, like that is it. It's not that we're making more doulas or making more birth workers, that we're getting the knowledge back together so that we can support our own families. So that kind of support is within reach to every family member who wants it. And then we can uplift our midwives to be, like Maria said, the people of the community who provided all of the support from that journey here to that journey back. So we wanted to share with you all the wonderful work that our aunties do, that our local midwives do, the inspiration that comes from many of you doing the hard work of continuing to make this, to reawaken all of that stuff. And we know that the work goes beyond birth. And so we're very grateful to be here. Kinanas komtanawao, kasagiatinawao. Lori, I don't know if you have anything last to kind of share.
Thank you so much, Laurie and Nadia, for that moving presentation. Multiple times today throughout the presentations, I felt that that excitement and that drive for midwifery, and it really hits close to my heart and close to home. And again, I know that we have a few questions in the question and answer. And so some of those questions will be placed on the discussion board. And so we'll encourage answers there. Thank you again, Nadia and Laurie. It brings us to the end of day one of the forum. Let's see here. Before we close for the day, we are going to do a raffle for our second prize. And so we have Medicines to Help Us is a book written and illustrated by Christine Belcourt, well-known Métis artist. We are dancing for you, Native feminism and the revitalization of women's coming of age ceremonies by Hopi Valley tribe member Katcha Rising Baldley. Ulak and the Creatures of the Sea by Susie Napiuk Short, an Inuit author, was born in Frobisher Bay. And To Be a Water Protector, The Rise of the Wendigo Slayers by Winona LaDuke, who is my auntie, is an Anishinaabe leader in cultural-based sustainability. Red Rebel Armor Strawberry Sage hoodie is rooted in love, medicine, and healing, with grandmother moon glistening in the background. And a gift donated by the Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association, writing book with a phone holder and a stylus pen. And so again, just if you need to look away for the wheel spinning, we encourage you to do that. Who our lucky winner is. Gemma, congratulations, Gemma.
I'm gonna share quickly. If Gemma, you are in the chat, please let us know that you're here, or you can send me an email at rgreen@indigenous.midwifery.ca. But let's connect to get you this beautiful prize.
Thank you all for joining and taking part in this amazing day one of the forum. We hope to see you all tomorrow, the same place and same time. Just a reminder that you can join in tomorrow from the same link that you used today. Don't forget to add your PIN to the forum map and to enjoy the resources provided as well. If any questions come up that you want to add to the discussion board, I also encourage you to do that. Have a great day, everyone. Heit Sevka.